afternoon and welcome to our Teacher Professional Learning project. This is our 8th session and today we're going to be looking at the concept of maths mastery. It has been a topic of debate and at times a cause of confusion. Part of the confusion has to do with the fact that there's no agreed definition on what is maths mastery. So our wonderful panel today hopefully will answer a lot of your questions and put to rest some of that confusion. So I'm going to introduce our panel first. And over here we have Marianne. And Marianne has a wealth of experience in teaching mastery in a variety of places and countries. Here we have Emma, who is new to her mastery journey. And Emma's going to share her experiences of starting out in mastery. To my left, I have my colleague Julie. And Julie's going to share with us her experiences in mastery. And Caroline has been on the mastery journey for 7 years now and is going to share with us her journey in mastery and hopefully will answer some of your questions. So in order to start off, I'm going to ask, what exactly is maths mastery? Julie, I'm going to turn that question to you. Can you tell us, what is maths mastery?
Brilliant. That's a good place to start, isn't it? I suppose there's lots of different schemes and programs kind of published under the name Mastery. But if we take a step back from that and think about the pedagogy, in essence, Mastery is an approach that focuses on developing children's mathematical fluency and understanding over and above memorisation of methods and procedures. And I suppose, as the name suggests, that the idea is that children don't just learn the content, but they really master it so that their understanding is secure, it's flexible, it's adaptable, it's confident. Mastery builds really strongly on the CPA, that's concrete pictorial abstract approach, where mathematical concepts are introduced in a concrete way and then only subsequently moving to abstract thinking. And I suppose the other thing is that instead of aiming to cover more and more content, there's a real focus in Mastery on depth and kind of in response to or against superficial learning, which can be easily forgotten.
Julie, for anybody that's joining us that doesn't know, practically what does that look like in the classroom? What does a Mastery lesson look like?
Yep. I suppose it's important to say that every Mastery lesson looks different in the same way that any other lesson looks different. It depends on the class, depends on the teacher. But if we think about maybe the general themes, Mastery lessons are often broken into kind of small connected steps that allow concepts to unfold. And I guess that makes it really accessible for children. There's really significant use made of representational tools, so diagrams, manipulatives, right through. That's a real, I guess, key feature of Mastery teaching. One of the other real key convictions underpinning a Mastery approach is the belief that everyone can achieve well in maths. So the world in our classrooms, they're not split into maths people and non-maths people. Everyone can achieve highly in maths. And so I suppose Mastery to some extent rejects this idea of different ability groups within a class. Now, of course, that doesn't mean there's no differentiation, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But broadly, your whole class will be moving at the same pace through a topic, and as a teacher, you're not moving on until everyone in the class has a really secure grasp of the topic. Children will be thinking at different depths. But it's the same topic, but a difference in depth rather than, I guess, a different in learning in that sense. So that's what it would look like in a classroom. I suppose we could say, what does a typical lesson look like? I guess, again, there's no typical lesson, but you might be starting with a whole class discussion. Mastery often works off the back of a problem to be solved. So maybe you would start with a class discussion on that problem, different perspectives from different pupils. Then you might go into smaller groups again for pupils to work on their ideas and discuss that. And then you might move to individual practice for children to reinforce their learning.
Thank you. Very interesting, Julie. Caroline, I'm going to come to you because about 7 years ago, you and your school decided to change to a Mastery approach. Mm-hmm. And it has been a long journey with its ups and downs, and there's been pros and cons to it. So maybe would you share with us what made you make that decision or make that choice in the first place? And what have been some of the advantages and disadvantages to going down this mastery journey? Tell us about your journey.
So yeah, it's definitely been a journey in that sense of there's been ups and downs and everything in between. Maybe that journey, it was really inspired by a desire for change which came from the department. And I don't know about any other maths teachers, but we seem to be teaching the same thing all the time, and we're confused. Why do they not understand? We taught this last year, you did this last year. Fractions, we just seem to constantly be doing that. Yes. And always fractions. And we maybe think that they do know what they're doing, and they do their tests at the end of the topic, and we get a class average of 90%, and we all feel really good about ourselves. And then it comes to next year and we're doing the same thing again. And it was the children knew how to divide fractions or knew how to add fractions and those things. Their procedural knowledge was really strong. Their procedural knowledge was great, but they had no conceptual understanding. And that was really, the desire for change. And it was just to create that buzz, I suppose, as well within the department. And I would say now that our children really enjoy maths. Our children, which is not maybe always the case, they enjoy coming to the lessons. They enjoy, like you're saying about what does a maths mastery lesson look like. I would say it looks really messy. Mm-hmm. It looks messy. Yeah. There's manipulatives lying everywhere. There's whiteboards. There's markers. It's really, really different than maybe
noisy.
And very noisy. Yeah. And a lot of discussion. And we really want the children's mathematical language to be really strong as well. And the language that they're using is incredible. So that's been a real highlight, I suppose, for me, the way that they're able to articulate their learning and make connections. We're drawing bar models when they come in through the door in year 8, and that's being built upon in lots of different topics. So they're able to see the links between topics as well, which has been a real highlight. I suppose if we're thinking about ups and downs, me personally, the amount of planning that it requires, it definitely is a great increase for me, and that might be different than what people think. People might think you buy into a scheme, or you download these lessons and you're good to go. I spend far more time planning for, my Key Stage 3 heavily mastery lessons than anything else. But you're planning in the right way. You're planning for, what do I want the children to be learning? What do I want the children to be discussing? Who am I going to ask this question to? Because you're not planning your worksheet. You're not trying to find or create the perfect worksheet. You're taking what you have and adapting it to the children who are in front of you, which is brilliant. And we as a department as well, we have time. We have a departmental workshop every week where us maths teachers get together and do the maths. It's so fun. But it actually is, because how often do you get the time to do that? To do, right, this is what the children are going to be doing. How am I going to approach this? It's completely different planning. It's not you're planning your worksheets and you're planning your homework and you're doing this. It's planning for learning. And that's wonderful. I really enjoy that. And I suppose as well, just want to say that a real pro that has come from it is the collegial nature of the department, the culture of everybody working together. And I think that's really essential, that we're all in it together. We get together at our maths mastery meetings and we're very honest at our workshops, and we say, I don't think this is going to work, but I'm going to try this. And nobody's afraid to say that. And we have a real culture of, open door policy and come on in, see what I'm doing. And I think that's essential, and really strong and good leadership within a department to steer along that journey as well, which I've been so fortunate to have as well. So fortunate. And I think that's essential along the journey in order for it to be a success.
And you have a big success there with your
yes, definitely,
your mastery teaching.
Yes,
but it's certainly an unpredictability when you're teaching mastery.
It is, yeah. And maybe as maths teachers, we like to know the answer, and we like to know how to do things. And it's a huge change, in the beginning. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just really good, solid teaching, and it is letting go a wee bit. It's letting go and let the children speak, and you know, hearing their conversations and encouraging that, which can be daunting at the beginning, but it's brilliant. It is great to see how they can develop into mathematicians, really, which is what we want.
So your journey has been mostly a positive one?
Oh, completely. And I think it can be a real success to really embrace the mastery concept. And even, you know, say you're teaching at Key Stage 3, it really impacts everything else that you do, because when you go in to teach topics at GCSE at A level, you're thinking about the why and the deeper understanding. And sometimes it can come back and the children at A level will say, but why is that? And you really have to sharpen you know, because you want to be able, you've developed these great mathematicians and you want to be able to respond to them and to really go along with them on that journey as well.
So you're developing yourself as well as developing the children?
Almost definitely. You know, who I am now as a teacher is completely different to the teacher I was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, because you're constantly learning and you're constantly discussing within the department, how are you going to do that? That's a wee bit different. We'll give it a go and see, what did you think? It's not just, you know, the same old. So definitely keeping me fresh as well. And with Mastery, there's a lot of focus on professional development. So watching videos, discussing things, even saying, did you see that on Twitter? What did you think? And that's, again, within the department, that culture would be really strong. And that has come from the Maths Mastery approach as well.
So speaking of different types of teaching, I'm going to move over to you, Marianne, because you have experience of teaching in different places. You've taught in England, I know you have as well, Julie. You've taught in Latvia, and you've had lots of different experiences of teaching Mastery. Has, generally speaking, across all your experiences, do you feel it has helped or has it hindered children? And does it work for some and not for others?
Yeah, I've been lucky as well that I've taught both in primary school and in secondary schools as well. And I would say that it's a big benefit to students. One of the things the Mastery approach encourages is students' mathematical thinking and language skills. So using STEM sentences. So we expect children to be able to express their thinking. We have to give them the words first. So I know last year we did the science of reading. I'm a big believer if a 4 or 5 year old can understand what a phoneme or a grapheme is, they can understand the mathematical language that they need to use to empower them to be able to explain what they're doing, rather than just saying, I just know because I know. And also that use of mathematical language really is helpful for newcomer students as well. Particularly when I worked in Latvia, a lot of the students had English as their second language, possibly even a third and a fourth language as well. And being able to give them the English words for what we were doing in class really brought their actual English on as well, their English acquisition, language acquisition. The bar modelling that Caroline's already mentioned, and Julie, is brilliant because it gives children tangible tools to actually approach a problem and pick the maths out of the problem, especially if they're having language difficulties, because they can pick out what's going on and it really visualises what's happening. They can see the maths happening. Students then become creators of their own learning. We're not that didactic teaching where we own all the maths and we tell you how to do it. They're very much creating their own learning in that constructivist approach. And it really empowers the students, I feel. Now, I'm a maths teacher as well, so I love numbers. So in my previous schools in England, we brought our students' age-related expectations in Key Stage 2 SATs from 63% of students achieving that to 82% of students achieving that. And also the greater depth, which is another thing they measure in England, up to 20%, 25% of students of a cohort of 90. So it's a quarter of the students achieving those top grades. And that has good ramifications for further on at their GCSE and possibly A level. So I think it works because I've seen it. Hindrance-wise, I would think that there are some pupils who are very resistant, particularly if you're starting when they're a wee bit older and you're bringing things in like the manipulatives that we have here. But I can do it. I don't need to draw a bar model. I can see it this way. They can be, because they just want to get to the answer and they want to show you how smart they are, and I always say something like, I know you're so clever and I love that you know the answer, but I'd love it even better if you told me how you did the maths. And that the maths, the answer is important, but it's not the mathematics. And that we'll get there in the end. I did find, working in St. Louise's, a lot of the students had come from a primary school that maybe didn't have a mastery journey. So introducing the manipulatives and everything, some of them sort of like, we use these in P1. Why am I using them again? And they didn't initially see the use of it, but teaching them how to use the actual tools, again, empowered them to be able to access the maths. And we talked there about differentiation, Julie. I always say it's differentiation by access of the lesson. Some students will just whiz on, be able to do those deeper diving activities. Some students will be using manipulatives, but you're all working towards the same goal. And another thing that's come up, I've heard from masteries, it doesn't stretch the more able pupils, which I disagree with, because if your task design is really strong, then you're going to choose tasks that can be approached from multiple levels. So like your low threshold, high ceiling activities, they're going to stretch all pupils. And that's the aim of mastery, is that we're all growing up together and not stunted.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I found you were saying about resistance. When I first introduced mastery into my class, the people who were most resistant were actually the more able maths students, because they were very secure in, I have a formula and a routine and a way to do it, and I'm secure with that. But, don't give me these bar models and these extra things. Just let me go on ahead, with this. And I think, Caroline, we talked about that. That works fine and well up to a point.
Yeah.
And then they come across a problem that's a lot more difficult. Yeah. And sometimes they don't have the strategies or the procedures to apply their little formula to that particular situation.
One that I find comes up a lot is, multiplying or dividing by 10, 100, 1000. Desperate to take zeros and add zeros on. Right? And I go, okay. And then I always put up a decimal number and go, where's your zeros? You can't take them away. So they do want a strategy. But I think instead of them thinking we're trying to take their strategy away, we're actually giving them more. And that really we're giving them tools, and you always pick the right tool for the right job. So it's important to have multiple tools.
I think as well, we're not taking your strategy away from you, but we're helping you understand why you do that strategy. Like for example, whenever they talk about multiplying and dividing fractions, turn it upside down and multiply it. Why? Why do you do these things? I don't know. That's just the way you do it. And it's helping them to come to an understanding as to why are you doing that, rather than just blindly following a formula. Emma, I'm going to come to you because you were newer to the mastery journey, and I know a lot of people might think mastery, that's very new. That's not the way we were taught to teach it in college. That's not the way we teach it. And you certainly weren't taught mastery in university, or at least you thought you weren't. So what was it like for you coming out, having been taught in teacher training, to this is the way you do things, this is how you teach maths or numeracy, and then going to a school that had a totally different pedagogy and you had to relearn everything, or did you?
Yeah, well, I would actually disagree with that and think during my PGCE that we were taught a lot of the research behind effective teaching. So what Julie's talked about, concrete, pictorial, abstract, effective questioning, active learning strategies, and ultimately developing their conceptual understanding. But I think I had a preconceived notion that a lot of teachers would have, that this was a programme that you had to buy into. It was just following a certain scheme, rather than actually teaching for mastery, teaching for depth, and to encourage our children to enjoy maths, and that they're not just process regurgitating, but they're actually understanding what they're doing. So I was very lucky that I joined St. Louise's in 2020 and was given CPD training from the get-go, and Caroline's touched on it, the ability to have colleagues that surrounded me that talked about effective pedagogy and sharing best practice and what would this look like in a lesson, and we could have those open discussions. So being a newly qualified teacher is a steep learning curve anyway, and taking on a full timetable. But I felt very supported because there was lots of talk on what makes effective teaching in our classroom. The one thing I know my colleagues have already mentioned is maybe a bit of extra work, so planning a lesson. So I would have been that child, I imagine, in school that says, I know how to do this is great, and move on with it. But I had to sit and think, but why? What is happening? What's the maths behind it? And there's so much that I've learnt in the last 3 years about maths. that I feel embarrassed that I called myself a mathematician before that. That there are such basic concepts. I'm like, that makes sense, definitely. And to be able to actually give our students, as Marianne said, the tools to recognise this is why we're doing this is so empowering, I think, for them and for us, to be able to spread that understanding. So that's been fantastic. I think also a good thing about being newly qualified and entering the teaching profession is I don't have habits to break. So I could see more experienced teachers saying, I've done it like this, it works, it's fine. But it has honestly been so enjoyable to put that into practice. And I think one thing that I struggled with at the start was my own use of language. I didn't realise that certain words that I was saying weren't mathematically correct. And now I'm at the stage where the children are shouting at me if I accidentally say top instead of numerator, which is amazing that they have that confidence. They know their mathematical reasoning and their language that they should be using. I think it's very important when you're planning to be a facilitator of the discussion and to preempt what certain students are going to say. So that can be a challenge too, because they will be so creative and their method, I have to sit and think, does that work? Yes, it does, and praise them for that, and to recognise that our subject is creative and that we should praise that creativity and inspire that in our students, because if we are following the NI curriculum, we should be developing thinking skills and personal capabilities. And I think often other subjects are branded with maths that isn't creative.
Yeah.
We have so much opportunity to explore that, and their problem solving aspects, their self-management, their ability to communicate all through the Maths Mastery programme. So that's been fantastic. Now that I've had a full cohort of Key Stage 3, so my first year to third year, the students have just enjoyed it so much. I have seen the difference. I have seen first years that come in saying, Miss, I'm not good at maths, just to let you know, who leave in third year there saying, I really enjoy maths, I'm really engaged in it, and who can verbalise their reason, understand the problem, and not just the process behind it. So I just think it's been very good as a newly qualified teacher to enter a department that are so supportive, and there is that discussion and that we are implementing it. But I will say that there has been challenges. I've had to sit at home and practice using the manipulatives and how I'm going to explain it. I have had lessons that have went horribly, but that isn't all experiences. When you're starting out, you have to see what suits you in your own teaching style. And Caroline's mentioned there an open door policy. I remember at the start doing strips of paper for the fraction wall, and I taught it and it went awful. I said, I need to see someone else doing this. And once I've seen that, my first year, I've used that every year since, and it's been great. And I just feel like that my growth as a teacher has been propelled by being part of that Maths Mastery department.
For me, I found the hardest part converting. I'm a convert to mastery. For the hardest part for me converting was that letting go of control.
Yeah.
You know, I was the teacher, I knew it all, and I was going to pour these empty vessels full of my wonderful knowledge. And the shock for me was then the children were coming up with ways that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, definitely.
But was probably a much better way than the way I was going to teach it.
Absolutely.
You know, and it was that realisation that mastery is where we're learning together. I'm learning from them as well as them learning from me. But that insecurity of letting go, I found that very hard.
I think it's hard too, behaviour management wise, that you need to be confident with that if you're going to have those open discussions that people are actually talking about the maths, and it's not an opportunity that we're scattering. So maybe when I started out was making sure I had the behaviour management locked in, just to make sure that the learning's, I'm facilitating any discussion, but definitely letting go. As you said there, Darlene, you will be surprised what some of the students can come up with that is a far more efficient and effective way of actually doing the process.
I think every one of us has had a eureka moment, you know, when we've been doing mastery. I know for me, it was the first time someone showed me quite what I thought was quite a complex problem. And the first time I saw a bar model, and I went, why did nobody ever teach me like this? You know, why was it made so complicated? You know, because mastery breaks it down in such simple steps that it really is accessible for any learners.
Yeah, I think if you show like algebra, the child that, you know, is mystified by why we're bringing that in, and then introduce a bar model and they can do it, no problem.
I have actually done algebra in P2 with counters, because the children are used with using counters and they know a green and a green and a blue, you know, that has to add up to 10, you know, so they know 2, 2 and 6 and all the different ways of making it. And then it's just a matter of 2 blues plus 1 green.
Yeah.
You know, so even children as young as P2 can access what we presume is a complex thing like algebra, but in actual fact, when they get it practically with the manipulatives and they get it young enough, that mystery has gone by the time they get to, you know, the stage you have them coming in year 8.
Yeah, definitely.
I suppose as well, just when you're saying about the light bulb moment, when you're like, oh, maybe this is for me. For me personally, it was teaching area. And a lot of the time the children come in and they say, we've done this before. Or, you know, people might think, you know, mastery going way back to basics in year 8. And the children have done area before in primary school. And I'll put on the board and I'll say, you know, what is area? And they'll all say, length times breadth. And I say, that's how you find the area of a rectangle. What is area? And you get these blank faces because they don't know. Do you know, they don't know. They know how to do it. They learned the formula for shape and for one shape for the rectangle. And they're like, yes, I know how to do area. And really the discussion that comes from that and coming up with the definition together as a class, it just changed me because I was like, oh, they don't know. They don't know what area is at all, you know.
Ladies, I have some questions that have come in from the people that have registered. Now, there are far too many questions for us to try and answer them all. So what Julie and I did was we sifted through a lot of the questions and tried to pick out some of the reoccurring questions. So sorry, folks, if we don't answer all your questions at this stage, but we've picked out ones that we think are the ones that are coming up the most common. So the first question that has been put to us: what age and how do you introduce mastery? And a similar question that came up was, what are the drawbacks and pitfalls if you're following mastery when preparing children for things like the transfer test or for GCSE? And I'm going to get Caroline to address that one for me.
Okay, so for me personally, I would imagine if you're introducing this into your school, you want to do it gradually. So we're not just going, okay, we now do mastery with everybody, okay? Maybe you are year 8, you know, in a post-primary school, start with year 8, and then the next year 8 and year 9, and then the next year 8, year 9 and year 10. And like, that's a lot of work. Do you know, it is a lot of work, and it's a lot of adapting schemes and looking at lessons and sequencing topics, but it will be worth it. And you will get the prize when it comes to GCSE, because at that stage, your children will be more secure in their knowledge that they've learnt at Key Stage 3. So when you get to GCSE, you're not going to be spending that time going over those fractions again, because they are going to have a better understanding. And of course you will have to recap it, but they will have a better understanding. Like this year, my A-level class, A2, year 14, they were our first Maths Mastery group. And we had such brilliant outcomes at AS, one of the most successful that we've ever had. So it will work, just building up slowly and slowly. And I would imagine then in the primary school setting, starting in primary 1 and working your way up. I don't think you could just say, okay, this is our transfer group, let's go with them. I think it does need to be built up, and it might be a wee bit uncomfortable at times, that building up, but it will be worth it, because by the time they get up to your transfer level, they're going to have such strong knowledge in what they've been studying in their maths that they'll be great mathematicians, and that's really what we want.
I had a similar experience in primary school. I visited 2 mastery primary schools over in England. One of them was very successful in mastery, and the other one were thinking of abandoning the mastery approach because it just wasn't working for them. And when we looked into it to see why did one work and the other one didn't, and the reason was because one school decided, okay, we're going to go mastery this year, the whole school's going mastery. But the children who were P6, P7 age, they didn't have that background of doing things, and their scores plummeted. And with Ofsted and that they have in England, that was not a good idea. And there were so many gaps or different ways of doing it. The school in Bexley that I went to that was very successful with Mastery, it was a rolling programme. They started out in primary 1, and then the next year, though, just as you described, starting with year 8s and post-primary. So their rolling programme actually took them 7 years. But by the time they got to the end of the 7 years, the children were well versed and their scores were through the roof. They did really, really well. So in answer to that question, I think we're agreeing here that you wouldn't introduce Mastery straight away into a transfer GCSE class. They have to have the background. And if you're thinking of this for your school, it's a rolling programme.
Yeah, and definitely, sorry, just to add to that, that even if you are teaching it only to year 8, that will impact how you teach it, to other year groups. Because you'll start to question things, and it will shift your pedagogy. So while you might not be following a Mastery programme, say in year 12, it will impact your teaching, because your thinking will change as well.
So the second question that I have here, there were quite a lot of questions has come in on assessments, baseline assessments in numeracy, baselining children with difficulties. We've had quite a number of questions on assessment. I'm going to take that one, ladies, because our next teaching professional project recording is going to be on problem solving and assessment. So I'm going to leave that question until the next recording where we can address everything about assessment. So the next question I'm going to ask, and it ties in a wee bit, I think, with what you were saying, Marianne. Question that has been put to us, I think this one came from Oma. What practical resources can be used for children using Maths Mastery, particularly older children, Key Stage 2 children or children into post-primary, where they're not used seeing and using manipulatives? It's something that's associated with the early years of primary. So, Julie, I'm going to let you address that and maybe explain maybe some of the manipulatives that could be used.
Yep, absolutely. Like we say, one of the really key things of Mastery teaching is use of manipulatives and use of manipulatives right through. So, up into Key Stage 2, up into post-primary, that's just a normal part of Mastery teaching. You can see we've got a lovely box here on the table. I'm going to show you maybe just 2 of my favourites for post-primary. So here I've got some 2 colour counters. So yellow one side, red the other side. These are brilliant for all kinds of things, but thinking sort of Key Stage 2, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, brilliant for negative numbers. So representing, a positive number, a negative number, the idea of putting those together. +1 minus 1 is going to give us 0. Really powerful in terms of representing negative numbers. Difficult topic.
I only started doing that within the past year or 2, and
like changing, right?
Yep. I was like, oh yes, that's how. Especially when it's something like a negative, take away a negative, and it's just and they really understand it then, and then they're not getting bogged down by those rules like 2 negatives make a positive and all and all that sort of thing. So yeah, they've changed my teaching style.
100%. These are probably my favourite ever. The other one, if we go maybe right up into sort of GCSE, even to higher tier, so algebra tiles. Now these, you can buy sets of these. These are just printed. And these are just printed onto card, maybe laminated. So you can see I've got here a tile representing x squared. I've got one representing x. I've then got one representing numbers. And this idea of sort of coming back to area, the links between area and algebra. So for example, I can think about, well, an x that way multiplied by an x that way is going to give me an x squared block. And again, just a really, algebra I think is something we think can't be visually represented. Oh yes, it can. And actually that's going right up into what higher GCSE, even up to A level.
Completing the square.
Completing the square, absolutely. Yeah. Who knew completing the square was about a square? So there's loads. Those I think would be maybe the lesser known ones.
I use those 2-sided counters for P2 algebra.
Yeah. P2 right up to.
If you have an orange and a yellow, show me all the different ways you can make 10.
Absolutely. So these are probably the ones that maybe are a wee bit lesser known. There's a huge amount of guidance online about how to use these. There's a 30-second introduction, but there's loads of really helpful stuff online about how you would actually use these. So there's my recommendations.
Marianne, you've got some of your favourites along. Do you want to maybe pick one? Because
It's very hard to do.
Online versions.
Yeah, because these can be expensive, but you can print out pictorial representations of them anyway and laminate them and use them next year. I haven't got it here, but my favourite thing is a place value grid. A laminated one that they can write on. Sometimes I make a big, like an A3 size, so we can actually put the likes of our Deans, our base 10 on it. I also love the multi-link. Multi-link are great for everything. They're great for showing fractions, percentages of amounts, everything. Also the good old bead string. I've actually seen people make these with buttons and stuff before, when they haven't bought the proper ones. But and just having like multiplication grids and 100 squares. For example, if you're teaching long multiplication and you're wanting to teach the method because you're onto that part and you want to teach the written method, I give them a multiplication grid, because some students maybe are struggling with their times tables and you're trying to show them a process as well. So give them the tool to help them. But we use these practically in every single lesson. And yeah, they're just really, really good and invaluable.
And maybe we're saying on that, maybe you're going to come to this, we're all thinking budgets. There's wonderful manipulatives and there's certainly some brilliant purchasable products out there, through Dean's Blocks and Multilink, but actually you don't have to go and spend money. There might be particular ones you would choose to invest in, but we've used egg boxes and pasta. We've used egg boxes and pasta, absolutely. Grips of 10 straws, and so there's no need. Maybe particularly if you're thinking about sort of starting out and of course about investing money, you don't have to go out and buy the latest of everything. There's loads of it. It's about the representation rather than the shiny product. It's probably worth saying.
And being creative. Maths is all about being creative. So I'm going to move on to another question, and this question ties into schemes, and maybe this is part of the confusion where some schemes had mastering maths or maths mastery in their title. But one of the questions I have here that was sent in, are there any particular schemes which should be used to teach maths mastery? And another question that sort of fits with that one is, does maths mastery fit in with our current commercial scheme that we already have in the school? And I'm going to throw that one over to Emma.
Yeah, I think that when we're talking about mastery, it's been around a long time. It's nothing new. It's that effective pedagogy. And if we're thinking about the schemes, there's nothing, Julie, you just mentioned there, you don't have to buy into certain things. It is more how you are adapting your lessons and how you're teaching that scheme, and that we're not religiously sticking to that, but using it as a guide of what we want the children to understand. But in terms of our actual lesson planning, we are thinking about the why behind the how to do it. So I don't think there's anything in particular you need to buy into, but it would be time consuming in terms of maybe adapting your schemes to make sure you are building on that knowledge bit by bit, and then in terms of lesson planning to fit those schemes. So extra time given the class discussion, all those things that we've talked about that make effective mastery teaching.
I think what I noticed whenever I started my mastery journey was a flip in the idea, in that instead of me teaching the maths scheme, I was using things out of the scheme to fit into my planning that I'd done for mastery.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful that we don't get too rigidly tied into any particular scheme, that you can't start at chapter 1 and work your way the whole way through, that going to the Northern Ireland curriculum, we're looking at what topic we're teaching and where we're getting resources to help us. And that's the way I use my schemes now, rather than maybe the way in the past where I would have been quite tied into a scheme.
Yeah, because we're there to teach the children, not the scheme.
Yeah.
I love that phrase. Marianne. We're there to teach the children, not the scheme.
I will say there's a lot of free things at NCTM, given that they've done so much work in England with the maths mastery, that there is a lot of free templates and some schemes offered there that perhaps schools could work with to tie in with the NI curriculum here.
Yeah, we have to be very careful that a lot of the schemes that are produced out there, commercial schemes, are produced for the English curriculum. Yeah. And that's fine if anybody here is teaching in England. Yeah. But whatever country you're teaching in, it's adapting whatever you're using to suit the curriculum that you're teaching, you know, and making sure it ties in. So I have another question here. One of the questions, does maths mastery confuse or help children with a language deficit? And I think, Marianne, you already addressed that when you talked about children in Latvia and you talked about developing children's mathematical language and that. So I think we sort of covered that question. So here's an interesting one. We've touched on this a little bit, but how has teaching for mastery helped or hindered the teacher? So I'm going to let you have that one, Marianne. How has it helped or hindered the teacher?
Well, if I start with helping, for me particularly, it's helped me with my own subject knowledge and having that deep knowledge of the knowing. We've already talked about the why and the how rather than just the do. And increased CPD opportunities for me. When I was in England, I got to go to a lot of like maths conferences, and you know, I got to connect with the maths hubs and see other people teach. It was just a really enriching experience that, you know, that hopefully we could emulate maybe in Northern Ireland in our schools, you know, and I know a lot of schools are in like teaching alliances and things like that. So that would be really helpful. And getting, especially being, I'm not a maths specialist. I'm primary trained myself. So even being able to provide that small step planning for me and that approach as a primary school teacher, knowing what was coming before, what was coming after, it really helped me with it as a teacher to not just to teach what I had to teach for my year group. I had to think ahead and think what was coming before, and maths mastery helps you to do that. Increase my confidence in the teachers that I worked with to deliver effective maths lessons, addressing misconceptions and thinking about what those possible misconceptions might be before you face them, so that you do have an answer, so that you're thinking of all the ways that children might answer a question. You've already thought about that through your planning, and help to support students confidently in their conceptual understanding of any problems rather than just teaching procedurally. Increased participation of students in my class. I mean, that's, you're talking about behaviour management as well, Emma. Like sometimes you just want the children to be engaged, and through mastery they are engaged, and I find that the behaviour then sort of cancels out, dissipates, because they're interested in what they're doing. And also having a whole school pedagogy, and you're all on the same page and you're all working to the same goal, and that's really empowering as a teacher. You're not just in your classroom with the door closed and it's what you're doing, it's what we're all doing it together.
I think that's a very important point, Marianne, particularly for anybody, you know, that's maybe watching this and thinking, I like the sound of that maths mastery. You can't do it alone. No. You know, you can't go in and close your classroom door and think, I'm going to teach maths mastery. I tried that one time and failed miserably. It doesn't work, I'm afraid. If you're going to go down the mastery route, it has to be a whole school consensus or a whole departmental consensus. Definitely. It's not something you can do alone.
And we actually had that inset day this year in August, where the whole school were trained as part of a mastery session just on what it is, and it was the maths teachers that delivered it, just to give them a bit more idea of what it is we're doing, you know, particularly if you're a form tutor and you're assisting with that, and just so they knew when we talk about manipulatives what it is we're doing in our classroom.
Yeah. And I think that collaboration is just really important. So I think the hindering factor would be for mastery is if you are doing it on your own, or it's not a whole school consensus. You can't undertake such a huge project by yourself or in one year group. It has to be everybody. And it can be costly in time and in resources. But I think we have discussed that your best scheme you're going to learn off, the best people you're going to learn off is your colleagues. So if you have that collaboration, that's a way of getting, you know, the CPD. Also resources was chatted about how there's a lot of free things that you can print off, you can laminate, you can keep. I think it can increase maths anxiety slightly with some teachers because they, especially non-specialists, so they would really need to have that subject knowledge support to feel empowered to be able to deliver that content. And we did touch on how manipulatives can be a bit expensive, but there is a way around that, I think. But I'll be honest, overall, I just think that it's helped me as a teacher really have a love for the subject. You know, I know that passion is already there, but whenever you have that time to collaborate with your colleagues and to talk about it, and then you actually feel excited, I can't wait to try this in my class, to see how it goes in my class and report back, and then we're all buzzing on like a Friday going, that looked really well, you know, and that's what we're here for. You know, we want the children to enjoy, it and their lessons and to get on in the subject. And I really think that it does do that.
And it's infectious too. You know, when you start getting into that mastery journey and, you know, you start talking to somebody, we become very boring, don't we? Because we just get together. We you know, even we got together and even over at the coffee break, it was all talking about mastery and maths. You know, and other people tuning in going, is that actually real maths? I think we had that said to us one day, Julie. We were sitting having a cup of coffee and someone went, are you two actually discussing maths?
At lunchtime.
At lunchtime, yeah. Because something had just happened that we were so excited about, you know, and so enthusiastic. And that whole idea of collegiality leads me on lovely to another question that was raised. One of the questions that was raised here: is there any training or professional development available for mastery here in Northern Ireland similar to what the NCETM set up in England? Okay. Now, I'm going to give my opinion on this, but please, ladies, if you have other information, jump in. I'm not aware of any training here as coordinated as the NCETM because it's government funded and aligns to the English curriculum. And at this point in time, the way things are here, we don't have that. However, we're a small group. There's 5 of us, and we have found each other through our passion for mastery. And I'm sure there's other people out there who maybe have a keen interest or a curiosity or just want to find out a bit more about mastery. And I'm going to throw this out there, ladies. Maybe, just maybe, collectively, and we could set up our own informal maths hub. We don't have a government funded one, but we could have our own maths hub where we can share resources, expertise, experiences, and anybody else that's interested, come and join us and we can all collectively share our experiences, good and bad, you know, about that. So if anybody is interested in joining us in even considering getting together for an informal mastery hub, there's going to be an email come up at the end of this presentation, and feel free to message us and register your interest, and who knows, maybe this discussion will lead on to something else, and you know, it could develop onto something else. You know, so ladies, thank you all very much for joining us today, and thank you all for coming along and joining us today at this session of the 8th session of the Teaching Profession Project. All of the recordings to date, this is recording number 8. All of our recordings to date are on the St. Mary's YouTube page. And I'm just going to put a wee plug in here to look out for the next numeracy one. The next numeracy one is going to be on problem solving and assessment. And that will be coming up on social media and the different ways that we can advertise to you. And if you're interested in following our journey and following the next project, please register for the next one. And you'll see the link coming up. Join us on our mastery journey. Send us your questions, your information, and your interest. Ladies, thank you all very much.
Thank you.